To another Spagnoli, joined with me 98.5 The Sports Hub's Alex Barth. Barth, we finally get some actual football to talk about.
Look at
Some
that.
good things to take away, right? I thought it was, it was preseason football, all in all. Like, from the referee standpoint, from, sloppy mistakes. But I think,
Wow. This is your first post-game podcast. It's a preseason game, and you're going to right away go at the refs? That's your first take on a post-game pod? That is bold for the
and
preseason.
that
Wow.
Bailey Zappi, that was intentional grounding. The center was directly behind the center. So, like, they're in preseason form too.
Yes.
But
problem is they're in preseason form all year. But anyway,
yeah, I mean, I'll take it if that's a real game, of course. But I think we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't start out the episode with a little tribute to James White. Obviously, called it a career yesterday. You've seen throughout the last 24, 36 hours of players speaking so highly of him, the organization posting some of those those quick clips of his outstanding postseason resume. From you and I, who are obviously we're similar in age, I think obviously he was a rookie in 2014, but he was, I don't want to say underrated, but when you look at Dynasty 2.0, right, you think of Edelman, you think of Gronk, you think of Tom Brady, right? James White's right up there, man. I mean, if you look at his resume and the reception leader for Super Bowl history, everything he's done, man, it's just been absolutely insane. And like I said, hats off to him on an outstanding career. I really wish he could have made it back off that hip injury. I think that's a guy that would have came out with a vengeance. But certainly one of the best careers in Patriots history.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, running backs just have that clock, right? He just turned 30, and whether it's one big injury or a bunch of small injuries, it's a very physical position. But yeah, consummate Patriot. I mean, you look at the way Bill Belichick has raved about him. My brother texted me yesterday, is James White one of Bill Belichick's 10 favorite players he's coached? He might be. He really might be on that list. And, from the way he, not just that he was such a great leader, but the way he led as a quiet leader, lead by example, to his reliability. He really didn't miss games. He never put the ball on the ground. There was the stat during the broadcast last night.
Zero career fumbles.
Didn't fumble during games, but then, so after the game, we asked Evan McCourty about that. McCourty thought about it for a second and said, I don't think he ever fumbled in practice either. And if he ever dropped a pass, everybody just kind of stopped. So just, he was so automatic. He was so 3rd and 5, catch the ball in the flat at the line of scrimmage with the linebacker to beat. He's getting the first down every single time on that play. I mean, that kept their offense going, time and time again. So Edelman gets a lot of the credit for that, and rightfully so, but James White was kind of that guy too. Edelman tweeted it yesterday, right? We used to say 3rd and Edelman. Edelman tweeted 3rd James White, and it really was. Yep. So a guy that meant a lot to this team on the field, a guy that meant a lot to this team off the field, a guy, that meant a lot in the locker room, things like that. Just tremendous career, tremendous career, tremendous winner. Came at it with the right attitude. There's the Josh McDaniels quote a number of people have brought up the last couple of days. If I had 11 James Whites, everything would be perfect, right? So red jacket guy for sure. We'll see when he gets in. They are kind of backlogged as has been discussed, right? There's a number of guys that need to get in, but you look at the unprecedented success they've had at that position under Belichick. I mean, there's never been a weak link in the chain. You go from Kevin Falk to Danny Woodhead to Shane Vereen to James White. That's more than 20 years with just 4 players at a position that generally sees a lot of turnover. Whoever's going to fill it next, whether it's Ty Montgomery, whether it's Pierre Strong, whether it's Ramondre Stevenson, those are big shoes to fill. And it really, it's an impressive run, all impressive players, but James White really embodied the role, I'd say, as much as anybody else. And that was another interesting thing to me too. One more on this. When Devin McCourty was talking about it, I just found this fascinating. He talked about as a rookie, he remembered watching Kevin Falk and kind of learning how to be a professional from Kevin Falk. And then he saw James White take that same approach. He said he noticed a lot of similarities between Kevin Falk and James White in the way they went about their business. I just thought that was fascinating. And it also just highlights really how long Devin McCourty's been here. But those are my thoughts on James White.
Yeah, and I think it was Chris Mason brought up a thread from after Super Bowl 51 when he had the monster game in the Atlanta comeback.
Should have been MVP.
Right. But he said it goes back 4 years or 2 years prior when he was a rookie in 2014. He was inactive, right? That was the big game from Shane Vereen. I think he had
Right.
10 catches in that game too.
He did. Yep.
And White, the whole game was taking mental reps, you know, in on the game, listening to the play calls. And he said to Chris after the game, I was ready for my moment. So it's just little things like that I just think set him apart from so many others. Obviously, not the most physically gifted running back, right? A little undersized, very shifty, strong runner, but
Yep.
somebody that, right, he'd go games where he'd get 4 touches just because it was that type of game, or he'd be one of the biggest parts of the offense. It just was a week to week kind of game plan specific approach, but you always knew when you called on him, right? I thought Devin McCourty's quote, if Josh McDaniels used to say, if I had 11 James White, it'd be perfect, right? Because you could put him anywhere on the field. He was a mismatch versus anybody. Linebackers couldn't cover him. You could line him up out wide. Just a consummate pro, and somebody that I think they'll miss not only on the field but in the locker room and in the community. There's certainly I think Evan said it, there's a long line of dynasty Patriots,
Yep.
a logjam for that red jacket, but James White should be right near the top. So didn't want to get into the game without giving him his creds. Somebody
And
that
it's
I
you
looked up
mentioned this
to.
before we came on, but that's really how everybody started their press conferences last night. We talked to even guys
Right.
who were rookies, right?
Taekwon.
We'd ask a question, they'd say before I answer that, and then they talk about James White for a minute or two. So it felt like a fitting way to do it.
Right. So obviously, hats off to James White on a fantastic career. I'm sure we'll be seeing him around, around the facility at some point. It seems like he's too tight in that locker room and friends with a lot of those guys that he's not just going to go away and disappear. He should be around. But getting into the game, we got some real football to break down. Wasn't pretty. I like I said yesterday, preseason's one of those where you can't wait for the first game, and then after the first quarter, it's like, oh, we get 3 more quarters of this.
I mean, it's like going to the dentist. You have to do it. It's important, right? But you kind of grit your teeth and you get through it.
You dread it. Yeah. No, that's a good analogy. I like that. But let's start with the good. I thought good to see Tyquan Thornton get some touches early on. And one thing I wanted to note about him, willing blocker, right? I mean, there was some times, I think it was the first or second drive, where he was coming up and popping a safety, right? For a little guy like that, I don't want, he's 6'2", but he's, a light frame, right? I mean, you see him without pads on, and you can't believe this guy's in the NFL. He's certainly, that's just his body type. But somebody at that size, willing blocker, I think that's big for him, and somebody, obviously everybody knows about the speed, and he showed last night that we talked about. He's a crisp route runner. His release package at the line of scrimmage is really good. He's not going to struggle wherever you line him up, but doing little things like that, I think are really going to set him apart and push him up that depth chart, because he started, I think when they drafted him, right, he was wide receiver 5 with a lot to kind of prove, to unseat some of the guys ahead of him. But everything we've seen from him from the summer and in camp this year tied into last night. And this kid's a productive player, and I think that was the biggest thing that stood out to me, right? The touchdown's nice. He ran some good routes. Hoyer underthrew him one time. He had about 2 yards of separation. I think it was on, I forget the corner, but it was on the outside, kind of on the boundary. But prior to that, he was coming up, popping safeties. You love to see that from a rookie receiver.
Yeah, I talked about this a lot, kind of leading up to the game, right? Yeah, he's checking all these boxes in training camp, and it's great that he's doing that, but the game is going to be a big step for him. I think he took that step. I thought, like you said, the blocking, throwing his body around is great. Honestly, his best play, I thought, was the incompletion down the sideline, because you go and you watch how well he got off the line there, and then how fast he pulls away and separates. That's why he's a top 50 pick, is that play. Like, that's what teams are looking for. Ultimately, Brian Hoyer underthrows a pass a little bit. The defensive back's able to catch up. It falls incomplete. You hope that ends differently with Mac Jones, but I just thought that glimpse into what he can do, and this is really what the preseason is about, right? You're looking at the game in that way. That glimpse into what Thornton did on that play is a glimpse into really why they value him so much in the element he brings. Now, the touchdown's also impressive. For him to recognize his quarterback is in trouble, break off his route as quickly as he did. Guys that big, that fast, generally don't have good short area quickness. He showed it right there. It makes a nice catch, too, through contact. He drew the flag, still hauled in the touchdown. That's an encouraging sign, too. That's not a play every rookie makes. They might not recognize to break off their route, at least not as quickly as he did. If you watch Thornton, I mean, he recognizes at the exact right time when to break that route off, right? So I've seen people say, oh, he had 2 catches for 9 yards. How are you so impressed? You got to kind of look in between the stats. The stats really are not indicative in the preseason. So going back and watching that, I just felt really encouraged. And now into joint practices, I know he won't be facing Stephon Gilmore. I misspoke on the last podcast.
I didn't want to interrupt
I apologize. No, you can. It's fine. It's been a long week, just sitting out, baking in the sun at camp. He won't face Stephon Gilmore. I am excited to see him face J.C. Horn, unless I'm missing something with J.C. Horn. Watch, he's probably gotten hurt or traded or something. But yeah, big week coming for him, but he continues to check all the boxes.
And I think that whole wide receiver room popped, and some guys that are on the bubble,
Yeah,
right?
strong night overall.
Right, like I tweeted yesterday, Christian Wilkerson's going to have to do a lot to unseat a lot of these guys ahead of him. But that's a guy, even dating back to last year and even in preseason, right? You were big on him last camp when we were talking in the tent, like early on, right? This guy's and he popped in the preseason and it took him a bit. Obviously, they were able to get him on the practice squad. Every chance he's given an opportunity, he makes the most of it. And whether I don't think, right? You don't want to look at hypotheticals, but with how much success he's had and more tape on him in the last 2 years, that's a guy that you're probably not going to be able to get on your practice squad, and it might be tough to keep him on the 53-man roster. Obviously, depends on how many receivers they keep, but that's a guy that a wide receiver needy team is going to be real happy to add him. That's a solid depth piece. That's a guy who, whenever his name's called, he's making a play. Dating back to last year, the Jacksonville game, and I liked what I saw too from Trey Nixon as well. Had a tough third down drop early on in the game, bounced back with a monster second half. So some of those bubble receivers, man, are making it really tough on the coaching staff kind of heading into cut down day and as they dwindle down the roster.
Well, I'll say this. You mentioned Nixon's drop. Again, this kind of goes back to how you watch the preseason. That route, that 6-yard out on a 3rd and 5
nice
from the slot, that's, if he makes the team, that's why. It's to run that route. It's to fill that role. So I think if he makes that catch, you're seeing that play over and over and over and over again today. Obviously, the result's not there, but you kind of see the progress of what you want. And yeah, that group fighting for that last wide receiver spot, Trey Nixon, Christian Wilkerson. I'm going to throw a little Jordan Humphrey in there too.
I know, he had a good night too. Excellent. He had a really good night.
They're going to make it really tough, and they're going to push some of these guys at the top of the roster. And there was the report from Doug Kide yesterday before the game that Nelson Aguilar might be the odd man out, and they might look to trade him. I shared some thoughts on that, 985thesportshub.com. You can go check that out on the website right now. That's getting really interesting. And I'll say this. I know people are excited about Nixon, and I'm not saying he shouldn't be. And I know people are excited about Wilkerson, and that's fair, but I still have some questions about his hands. So I talked to little Jordan Humphrey after the game last night, and I kind of forgot he didn't play football in the spring. He was given a futures contract with the Saints, but was released before spring practices started. Wasn't anywhere in the spring, and then signed with the Patriots in like late June.
I was going to say it was June. Yeah.
Right. So I kind of asked him about, what's been different the last week, because he had a couple of great practices on Monday and Tuesday. Looks good in the game. I thought that touchdown, that slot fade, that's one of Mac's best routes. When you talk about like a quarterback throwing to a specific route, Mac is excellent on that slot fade. You saw Humphrey run it last night,
on it 100 times
for the touchdown. Mechie, exactly. Yep. So, I asked Humphrey, I'm like, what's kind of changed in the last week? And he said, I just playing ball again, getting into a rhythm, right? He hadn't been playing, and now he's back playing football every day. He's back running. He said just running 20, 30 routes a day or more feels good. He's getting comfortable with the Patriots playbook, with the offensive system. I'm not like giving this speech to say he's going to make the team, but I will say, one, if somebody does get traded, whether it's Aguilar or Myers or whoever, I think he's neck and neck with Trey Nixon right now. And I think he might have more momentum than Nixon does. And I would say, two, if they can somehow get him to the practice squad, he gives them tremendous value on the practice squad, because if they move on from Aguilar, right, they're not huge at wide receiver. They're not small, but they're not huge. But their biggest wide receiver, Devontae Parker, has an injury history. Humphrey would be a really good insurance plan if you need 2, 3, or 4 games that Parker can't play. If they can get him onto the practice squad and then elevate him, I think that would be a really interesting direction for them to go. So I don't sleep on little Jordan Humphrey. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and back on Thornton and kind of the whole Aguilar report yesterday. obviously I'm not going to go into the cap specifics. I know you're not a cap guy either. I'm not even going to try to pretend like I know, because I don't. But
Yeah, every
right,
time I do
everybody
it,
knows.
Miguel yells at me. So
Yeah, and it's that aspect of it too. It's just there's so much in the weeds that you don't really know. So I mean, but obviously moving on from him does open up space. There's no question about that. But also more on like the on the field presence, right? Like I think Thornton gives you a lot of what Aguilar does. He's more versatile, obviously cheaper, and somebody that you're. If it comes down to it, like who'd you rather have more targets this year, Tyquan Thornton or Nelson Aguilar, right? Like I think those two are similar in a sense, but I think Thornton can give you more because of his down the field presence. He's a little bit more versatile, right? And it made sense, I guess, to if push comes to shove, you hold on to him till the end of camp, right? Because you didn't know what you were going to get out of
right,
Thornton, right?
you're
He
not
could
doing anything now.
no,
This is we're talking about after the third preseason game or maybe right before. To me, it's similar to what happened with the running back position last year, where I don't think coming in Ramondre was going to be as involved as he was,
no.
but he had such a good camp and Sony was in a contract here that it allowed them to make that move. I think the dynamic between Thornton and Aguilar right now is similar to the dynamic between Ramondre and Sony Michel last year. And I think Thornton still needs to show a little more to get all the way there, but it's kind of shaping up similarly.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, um, we talk about it all the time, but that group, like if they played preseason 2 years ago, the COVID year, that wide receiver, like I don't even know what names would be out there. Just to even have this conversation for guys that are 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8 on your depth chart. Like you arguably didn't play your top four receivers last night. And I know it's preseason. I know it's not your starting quarterback. It wasn't a starting defense for most of the game, but a lot to like at that position as a whole. I think they have a lot of depth. But the interesting part about it, like I said, is how it comes up together, cut down day. How many do they keep? Who gets the nod, who's out, right? Like there's going to be I don't want to say a surprise cut at that position because nothing would really surprise me, but these young guys that played last night are making it really tough on the coaching staff.
Well, I would say this: all three of them, I think, showed their legitimate NFL talents. And
Yes,
to your point of like a surprise cut, they're gonna part ways with NFL talent at that position, which is the first time in a while we can say that about the Patriots at the wide receiver position. But it's a matter of I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think Trey Nixon overall is a better player than Nelson Aguilar, right?
no.
But would you rather have Nelson Aguilar or would you for 1 year? Or trade Nixon for 3 more years, and also you get like a 4th-round pick, right? That's what it comes down to, and that gap's starting to close, right? It's a little different with Lil Jordan Humphrey. I believe he's on a 1-year deal, but again, it's like, would you rather have one player or the player in the pick? And then again, with Nixon, you get terms. So it's the gap's shrinking. The gap's shrinking, and we'll see what happens this week. It's going to be big.
So shifting over to the defensive side of the ball, Patriots come out right away with McMillan.
Wait,
Uche.
let's do one more thing on offense. Let's do one more thing on offense here.
You want to talk about the quarterbacks?
No, well, yeah, Bailey Zappi was very good. You're welcome. No, I want to talk about the offensive line. They're in an interesting spot here up front, and we don't know what's going to happen with all this. But Yadni Kajus and Justin Herron both got hurt last night, right? And that to me is the battle for the swing tackle spot right now. I think Kajus probably has a bit of an edge.
I was going to say Herron didn't look good before the injury. Or was it 2 or 3 false starts?
Yeah.
Like little things like that. If you're going to be a swing tackle, you can't make those mistakes up front, especially.
And Bill did note last night that this is the best camp Yadni Kajus has had. The other thing that stood out, so they lose both those tackles. They don't want to put a starter into the game, right? Arlington Hambright played some tackle and looked okay, but he's looked good at guard in camp. They've given him some real run at guard, and now he has some tackle flexibility. To me, those 3 guys, Herron, Kajust, and Hambright, I think it's those 3 guys competing for 2 spots. And it's going to be interesting to see how that competition rounds out.
Yeah, I think overall, obviously, right, you didn't have your starters in the game. No Andrews, Wynn was hurt, Brown didn't play,
Right.
no Onwenu. Cole Strange for a little bit of time. I think he got a drive or 2. He looked good. One thing, too, I think it was a screen to J.J. Taylor. You saw the athleticism pop with Strange on that guard. He pulled as a guard, got upfield. I don't think he made a block or necessarily did much in the play, but the athleticism and his ability, they're going to have some fun with him because of his ability to be an athlete. You know what I mean? I don't think he's just that big. What was his combine, right? Didn't he test?
He tested
like
well,
number 1 tester for like someone at that size, at that position, right? Like that, the athleticism and his ability to get out there certainly popped. Liked what I saw from him from, the short stint we saw with him, but overall a decent night, I think, in terms of what they set the bar so low the last week, that offensive line unit. And I know it was a lot of backups and guys with their first NFL action. Decent night. I think, Hoyer was kept clean for the most part. Zappy was running around a little bit, but you don't know if that's kind of first game jitters. And he was a little erratic early on. I think that was good for him. You saw him settle in a little bit. I think that's big for a guy like that. First NFL action to leave, what could have been a game winning drive.
Right.
But overall, I thought, in terms of what they set the bar at this week, and I know a lot of them weren't playing, the offense was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree with that.
So we'll flip it over to defense because I liked what I saw. I think from the linebacker room, they came out right away with Jennings, Uche, McMillan in the middle, and then Mack Wilson. Mack Wilson primarily really showed some pop. Talking about it for years, especially last year after that loss to Buffalo, it was so apparent that they needed more speed and athleticism at that position. You got 4 guys with very minimal snaps in that system. I'd say under 15, right? Or Josh Uche probably played more than that, but you know what I'm saying. A lot of unexperienced guys at that position, and how much the Patriots value that in their defense and their scheme. Liked what I saw. I thought Wilson, they came out right away, and you could tell this group's a lot faster, a lot more athletic, probably a little bit more undersized than we're used to. But overall, I think a lot to like at that group going forward. And some of those acquisitions over the last 2 years are going to play big roles for them. So, good to see those guys step up last night.
Yeah, I think especially you saw the explosiveness with Mack Wilson, right? And that's what's
Yeah.
exciting, having that linebacker who can really fly around the field. And that was great. And I think you're kind of seeing what that group is. You're seeing both sides of it. I think it's going to be McMillan and Wilson playing off the ball next to Juwan Bentley. Meanwhile, Cameron McGrone, who was kind of penciled into that role coming into camp, I didn't think he had a great night. I think
And he
he's
played in the
still
second half.
Well, he's still working his way back from that knee injury. Just the explosiveness he had at Michigan isn't quite there. So I think you're seeing that group really get sorted out. To me, though, the best positional group on defense, and maybe in the entire game, was the defensive line.
Sam Roberts in particular.
Sam Roberts had an excellent game. I thought LeBron Ray, too, showed a lot. He didn't pop the way Sam Roberts did, right? Sam Roberts credited for 5 QB pressures and drew a hold as well. But, I'm watching LeBron Ray. They have him lining up at the 3 tech. They had him lining up at the 5 tech. I think he played a snap or 2 even of nose in passing situations. That's the value in a guy like that. That's why I liked him for them coming into the draft, is he's going to be able to play every spot on the defensive line. And with Dietrich Wise limited throughout camp, he's a guy that's been able to do that for them in the past. Lawrence Guy getting up there in age, he's a guy that's done that in the past. I think you're looking for that just plug and play. Wherever there's a hole, you can put him in and he'll give you something. Defensive lineman. And LeBron Ray kind of showed he can do that last night. So between those 2 rookies, I think really encouraging stuff from the defensive front.
Reminds me a little bit of an Adam Butler, and you could see someone like that kind of take over that role.
Yeah, he's just more athletic. He plays. I don't know that Butler ever played like on the edge, especially in rushing situations.
But in terms of, that rookie year, right? Like he was an undrafted guy, made the team, and kind of just as the year went on, he was seeing a lot more snaps like that. They're so good at that position. I don't think there's any issues with them primarily up front, but the front 7 in terms of their linebacker room, I think that might be a lot more smoother of a transition than maybe we thought, right? It's early. We don't want to jump to conclusions, but I like that group overall, right? If you can get a little more from McGrone and when Peppers comes back too, he'll help a little bit in that role. And you know how much Duggar can kind of play in the box a little bit. Adrian Phillips, right? They're really that front 7 that, whatever they kind of do has a lot of depth, and I think will be the anchor of their team this year.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And you mentioned Pepper's an interesting one. He's going to kind of factor into that too. Yeah, what killed them last year, I've said this before, what killed them last year in the front 7 wasn't necessarily they didn't have enough top end talent. It was that when they had to rotate, the drop off was massive. And you're seeing a much more significant depth right now at those positions. And that's what's going to be big, is they can rotate those guys out. They can rotate Barmore out. They can rotate Bentley out. They can rotate Judon out, let those guys stay fresh and still not have that massive drop off and still be able to compete with the guys that are in the game.
Right. And the cornerback room, Jawan Williams had a tough night. Certainly no.
I think he got pulled from the game at one point. Like, I don't know that I've ever seen that in a preseason game.
he got what did he get? Kind of he whiffed on a jam, got beat clean for a touchdown. It just didn't look right, and that's a guy that this is probably his first year with the Patriots in terms of, hey, there's, they were so loaded at that position the last few years. It was tough for a guy like him
I
to
think
really.
last year, I don't think the plan was always for Jalen Mills to primarily be an outside corner. I think they wanted him to be a rover. He could have won a spot last year.
True, but I think this year even more, right? Like there's
Oh
so
no,
many
this
new
year, I mean,
pieces.
he's still realistically is a shot to make the roster just based on numbers. But yeah, he had a rough night last night. That's one, and I wrote this in my post-game takeaways, which you can check out on 985thesportshub.com. That's the one position depth-wise I'm still worried about. I think, Terrence Mitchell had the forced fumble. He looks good. Jalen Mills didn't play. After that, I mean, where are you going? And this is a team that really loves to rotate. It's another spot they love to rotate at. Is it Malcolm Butler, who looked inconsistent? Is it Jack Jones, who showed some flashes, but that guy's aggressive. That guy, smart quarterbacks are going to eat that guy up. He needs to see a little bit more football to really capitalize on his physical abilities. I think we just said Juwan Williams was kind of a mess. I liked Shaun Wade.
I was just going to say that was
Wade had a good game last night.
One of the corners that really stood out to me, especially on the outside. He was sticky.
Yeah. And they need that outside help. I have him just off my roster right now. I'll have a roster projection on Monday. I'm working on it. I have him just off. I still have Malcolm Butler on because I think without him, that's a very young group. And I think having that veteran in the room is important.
And they really have nobody besides Jones. If you take Butler away, and I know he did a couple of years elsewhere,
right?
Jones is the longest tenured. Obviously,
yeah,
they think the world of him. But Jalen Mills is your next experienced corner that's played a lot, right? Then you have Mitchell, both Jones and Wade. It's tough. It's a tough cut.
So I still think Shaun Wade can get into that conversation. I also think I Miles Bryant just off. I think he can get in that conversation. He looked good returning punts. So the reason I have him off, I see the look on your face. And you guys still have to read my roster projection when it comes out. I know I'm kind of giving some stuff away here, but the reason I have Bryant off is he looked really good as a punt returner last night. But they have two
form on defense.
So that's the thing. They have two elite punt returners in Marcus Jones, who I think is penciled in as a starter based on the fact he didn't play last night. And then Jabril Peppers, obviously, his return game is legendary. So Brian's going to have to give him something on defense. And defensively last night, he gets beat early on that screen. Like he just wildly over pursued that. Right. He's going to need to show a little more. I don't think this is a rare one for the Patriots where we always talk about, yeah, the guy's doing a lot in his natural position, but can he give you something on special teams to make the team? This is kind of a rare one where it's the opposite. I actually like Miles Bryant as a punt returner. Can he give you enough as a corner to justify making the team? Because I don't know that he's playing a ton in kick coverage. So I think he can. Like, I'm not saying he's totally out. I think it's him, Butler, and Wade, those three guys for one spot for that last cornerback spot. You could, and maybe Juwan, if you really are optimistic, you could put in there too. But to me, it's those guys for one spot.
And everybody who watched Miles Bryant return punts last night, right? That was awesome to see. Just wait or go look at Marcus Jones doing that. If they put him there, right, it might be a guy where, like Edelman, everybody was kind of holding their breath, putting a guy that important. But I think early on like that, they'll throw him out there. That guy's electric with the ball in his hand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I just don't. Miles Bryant looked good last night. He hasn't done that since high school. He's doing it against second stringers. I still think Marcus Jones and Jabril Peppers have the edge there.
Right. So I think overall, pretty good night. I think wins and losses don't necessarily matter. You want to see the things you're looking for before the game. Tyquan Thornton and the defense, right? That stuff all stood out to us. So I think overall a decent first preseason game, considering we didn't see much. I think it'll get more interesting next week with the joint practices. You'll probably see a little bit more time from the starters to get their feet wet. But overall, for a first night, I liked it.
Also, shout out whoever's doing the back end, whoever just put my my link in the chat there. Everybody should go click on that. That's new. I didn't know we could do that. That's like a post-Evan thing. I like that.
Right.
Everybody go up and check that out. There you go.
Oh, there you go. There we go. There's Alex's takeaways. Everybody go read his stuff. Come on. I'll have some more written stuff as I get going here. I'll be there next week. Joint practices. I'll be at the game Thursday, so we can kind of work out some stuff going forward. But any I guess final thoughts on the game, Alex? Something that might have stood out that we didn't touch on. I know the quarterback's cool. They did well. Good to see Zappy. I was hoping to see a little bit more Mac, but I think that'll come in the next few weeks.
I thought Zappy looked good. He had a rough start and he bounced back. You always want to see that, right? Short memory with the quarterback. The play calling thing was interesting with Patricia calling plays early. And then when Zappy came, it was Joe Judge. This goes back to something I threw out in whenever it was they first hired Judge. I don't remember if it was late February, early March. I threw this out as a joke. I was on the
play callers.
The Sports Hub Sunday football show with Ted Johnson. And I kind of asked it. And again, I was like sort of joking. I said, we talk about camp battles in positions. Has there ever been a camp battle for coaches? I was, what do you mean? I said, for the play caller. He was like, I don't know. Like, I guess you could. I don't really know what it would look like. I've never seen it. Well, is that it? One guy calls half the game. The other guy calls the other half. And
I can't believe I didn't think of that to bring up.
Who they were more comfortable with. Like, I'm saying this half joking, but that is kind of what it looked like. It did kind of look like they're having a camp battle for the play caller job,
and it's not like they take
why not, right, at this point?
Yeah, and it's not like I saw a tweet. It was like, oh, it's just the same thing they're doing on defense. It's like, not really, because
not quite.
Primarily, right? Like, I think it's Steve who handles mostly the personnel and Gerard's the one communicating the play. Like, obviously they're working collectively. Other way around. Okay, right. Yeah. So, but Steve, this time it was
Gerard does a lot of the big picture game planning, and then Steve kind of does the play-to-play stuff.
Right. And then, but on offense, it's like when Judge was up, Patricia was, talking with the O-line, debriefing with the quarterbacks, and kind of a whole, cluster film. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? And is that going to work? Like, I don't think we've ever seen this, at least recently, where I don't remember anything, right? Like that, two guys splitting game. And I know it's preseason, but it's a head scratcher for sure. The whole offensive picture, the whole offseason has been just, so unpredictable. I would have never guessed that last night.
No, it's still one of the biggest stories to follow.
It is. What is your, like, do you think that works? Do you think they do that? Like, is it a camp battle?
I think what you would do if you're really going to go down this road, it's not a matter of who called the better plays, because they're both calling from the same play sheet, right? I think it's a matter of you go to the quarterbacks, you go to like the offensive line, you really just go to all the offensive players and you say, who did you feel better about? Who did you feel was the better communicator? Who did you feel you were in more of a rhythm with? Like, that to me is what it would look like if that's what they're doing. And both quarterbacks were kind of asked about that. Hey, who did you like hearing from better? How was it? And they both gave non-answers, which you would expect. But if it really is some sort of competition, I think that's what it is.
Right. No, I agree. And they'll be. Is it kind of similar in practice too? I guess I never really picked up on that, where they're both.
So it's been, for the most part, and this isn't entirely, but it's been Patricia calling plays during 11s, Judge calling plays during 7s, but Bill will jump in during both periods and randomly call like a play or two here or there. He won't take a couple times he's taken a whole session, but there's also been where you just kind of see him step in front of whoever's calling the plays that session and say something else.
Right. Okay. So I guess it's something to look forward to, the rest of camp and everything else. But all in all, preseason game number 1, I'm looking forward to, like I said, seeing more starters, and joint practices will be really cool to break down. If people can't get down there, there's certain matchups and things that stand out and how they looked against, like, those are more valuable, especially for the guys who are actually going to play, to really get their feet wet and get them ready for week 1. But anything else before we jump into maybe the Boston Sports Minute, if there's really anything going on?
So we had talked about this. I think this was when you were doing it. It might have been at the end with John. We were talking about Dante Hightower, and is he coming back? Is he not coming back? And I said, well, let's see what they do for rookie numbers. If they issue 54, that's a pretty good sign he's not coming back.
Even not in only the preseason,
what's up?
Even the preseason numbers change all the time, especially now.
Yeah, I would still call it notable. Not only did they not issue 54, we got to go in the lot. Last night was the first time we've had access to the locker room since COVID. It's we did post-game locker room. There normally isn't locker room access during training camp. We do it on the field, but Last year, it was only press conferences and Zooms. Obviously, 2020 was only Zooms. Dante Hightower's stall was not given out. And that's like a prime. He's right at the end of the row, right by the door. That's like a quality locker. That's something where if a guy's becoming a leader on the team or you want to reward somebody for high work, you move them to that locker. It's still open. So that tells me at least it hasn't been ruled out that he's coming back. I don't think it means for sure that he is, but I don't think we can say for sure that he's not.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a guy who probably doesn't need camp and preseason,
No,
right?
no.
You assume he's staying in shape. Might take him a little bit to get his feet going, but yeah, it would be interesting, right? And I think,
And the one thing I'll say before everybody freaks out about Dante Hightower, and you just said they have more athletic linebackers. That's what we want. Blah blah blah.
I was just getting to that. He's important to have in that room with how much inexperience they have.
Well, so even beyond that, you're not bringing him back to play the same role he played last year, right? 70-80%
No.
usage rate, middle linebacker. I love him. You bring him back, like not even that, or run stuffing, but on the edge. Put him on the edge, put him in the role Kyle Van Noy had last year, 35-40% of the time, outside linebacker. He's going to come in, set the edge against the run on early downs, maybe rush the passer a little bit. I think based on what we saw last year, I know he's lost a step athletically. He's still a mean dude, and he's still strong and nasty. He could set the edge. I still think that he could give them something in that regard.
Yeah, and like obviously different positions in different situations because White was coming off an injury. But him to come out then and announce retirement, I know he's under contract, but you haven't seen anything like that. I don't think anybody's really talked to him either. You just kind of assume he's staying in shape. I think he's been kind of quiet on social media, so I don't think anybody really knows. But it wouldn't surprise me. Like late in camp, right before the season, they bring him back on a 1-year cheap deal. Hey, give us, like you said, 35 to 40% of snaps. We're going to slowly transition your role, probably to like Raekwon McMillan seemed like was playing that Hightower role last night. But you're still going to help us in spurts, and we want you to kind of teach these guys. I think that'd be a good role for him. And, at this point in his career, I'm sure he'd be open to it. He's made it known that he doesn't want to play anywhere else, especially at this point in his life. But yeah, either way, I think wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
So I think that wraps up, unless Boston Sports Minute, the Red Sox, did they win last night, Alex?
They did. So this is
so they won a series then, right?
They did. They won a series against an AL East team. Granted, it was a 1-game series, but a little golf clap for that. Yeah. It's still rough. It's still ugly. We'll see. I mean, this could be a bad weekend against the Yankees. It could be a really bad weekend, but.
And then they go to Baltimore, and then the Jays. They have I saw like the next 14 to 17s all AL East. So make or break it really in the next, I don't know, 5 days. They're 4.5, 5 games out of that third wild card spot. It's clock's ticking. You got to get hot quick. And I thought, was it a month ago when they split with the Yankees? They had they had the comeback win on Saturday.
And Sunday. It was like, oh, look, they have some momentum.
My Yankee friends. That's when I first started texting the Yankee friends for the first time all year. I'm like, Sox are going to get hot now. They're getting healthy. They got Sale coming back. They're starting to hit the cover of the ball.
Have done that.
Trevor Story breaks his wrist. Kike's out. It went all downhill from there.
I'll spill some dirt here. I'll give you a little inside information. When the Red Sox were making their run in June and Evan was still doing the show, every time we did the Boston Sports Minute, he would text me and say, we're doing the Boston Sports Minute. I'm going to say it. And you remember what that was, right? The don't say it until whatever the date was. It was like June 27th, June 28th. Evan was trying to say it like June 10th. And I kept telling him not to. And I told him not to, but he wanted to say
the Sox? What, they were going to go the whole way, all the way?
It was the whole thing. It was the Jared Carrabis podcast, don't say it, whatever. This is interesting, though. We have a question during the Boston Sports Minute, which is, if the Bruins make another move, Spags, what should they do? I'll answer this one first. They should extend David Pastrnak. That's the move.
Yeah. Well,
but I assume this means external move.
Yeah, right. I think they have about roughly $20 million in cap space at the end of next year. You'll have Bergeron as an unrestricted, Krejci as an unrestricted. Who knows their futures after this year, right? I think it's maybe 1 year for both of them. Run it back. Let's see what we can do. But all they have to pay next year is Pastrnak and Swayman, who's on a bridge. He's restricted. They'll kind of sign kind of a bridge deal. They'll probably try to lock him up long term, but might not be the number that you'd expect for a starting goaltender. So I think they have that. They can really pay him whatever he wants. The interesting thing was the Huberdeau deal in Calgary is a kind of And Connor Ryan, good friend of mine, does a great job covering the Bruins. Wrote a nice article, I believe, on how the Huberdeau contract could affect the Bruins and similar numbers and career statistics as Pastrnak. So I think 8 for 80, do it right now, sign the paper. But as for this year, I like their top 9. I still think um, Zaka plays the left with Coyle, and I think they can upgrade a little bit with Craig Smith on the right side, but they have some guys like Studnicka who might blossom a little bit more. This is the last year, I'm saying, give him a chance with a new head coach, a new voice in there. Fabian Lysell is their first-round pick from last year, lit up the WHL. So I think if there's another move to become, I think it's internal. And their cap situation, they're right up against it. They might be over the cap at this point. So I like their group. I do. They're old, but hey, let's run it back for one time's sake. This is the only team, Barth, that like we grew up playing that still have core guys that won a cup here that you can root for. Krejci, I know Chara's gone, but you have Krejci and Bergeron and Marchand, right? That's from that team. So, and then Rask left, but that's like the one team that still has 3 of their core guys that they had when they were making all those runs. So it's easy to root for them.
Kick the can down the road. I guess they don't have like Brady and Edelman. They still have Devin McCourty,
you're right.
Matthew Slater. Right. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
So yeah, I think if there's another move, it's internal.
Yeah. All right.
But I think that wraps it up. Like I said, they're off this weekend. They're back on Monday. We'll probably do a podcast sometime Monday to kind of preview joint practices, see what's good for the week. And then we'll be right back at it, obviously breaking down the joint practices Tuesday, Wednesday, right into the game on Thursday.
Yeah, we'll do, like you said, joint practice preview Monday. Monday is going to be a very low tempo shorts and shells practice. It's mostly just it's almost going to be like it because the way they treat the joint practices, right? And the way they value those, it's almost going to be like a pregame walkthrough. They're almost going to prepare for these practices like they would for a game.
And they'll be physical too. So they'll be in shells. I'd put a 90% chance
for the joint practices.
Yeah, well, no, the Monday because
I don't think so. I think Monday's going to be shorts and shells. You can't do.
That's what I'm saying. Monday will be shorts and shells.
Oh yeah, no. Monday's going to be slow. There's not going to be a ton of takeaways from Monday's practice. But we'll use it as we'll kind of get an idea of maybe some of the things they want to do during the joint practices. So that will be interesting.
Right. All right. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see